Darius Washington was 41 years old, and for 14 months he made his bed every morning in a house that had become a crime scene. He just couldn't prove it yet. He owned a contracting company he'd built from nothing, 12 employees, $2.3 million a year, every dollar earned with his hands and his discipline. His wife Amber had been quietly draining their joint account for over a year. $47,000, moved in careful increments into an account she opened under her maiden name. She'd been funneling his money into her lover's real estate LLC while living in the house Darius paid for, and she thought he had no idea. The day he slid the divorce papers across the coffee table, Amber picked up the pen and signed without hesitating, smiling before the ink was dry. The smile of a woman who believed she had already won. She had no idea that 24 hours later, a certified letter would arrive that would bring her to her knees on that same kitchen floor. Because what Darius had built in silence wasn't just a contracting company. And what he filed that morning wasn't just a divorce. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:15. Darius Washington was already awake. He lay still for a moment in the dark, listening to the house, the hum of the HVACs, the faint creak of a branch against the back window. Nothing else. The other side of the bed had been empty since sometime around 2 in the morning, when he'd felt the mattress shift and heard the soft pull of the door. He hadn't moved. He'd just listened to Amber's footsteps travel down the hall toward the guest room. The same walk she'd been making 3 or 4 nights a week for the past several months, quiet and practiced, like she'd already decided not to explain it. He got up, made the bed. He tucked the corners the way his father taught him. Firm, even. No slack. James Washington had made his bed every morning in a 2-bedroom apartment in Panthersville after the bank took the house, after the equipment was repossessed, after 22 years of work dissolved in the 2008 crash like it had never existed at all. He never talked about what it cost him. He just made the bed, put on his boots, and started again. Darius had watched that. He'd carried it. He dressed in the dark, moved through the house with the ease of a man who knew every floorboard, every corner, every sound this place made in the early morning silence. The kitchen light came on low. Coffee brewed. He stood at the counter and looked out at the backyard. The grass still gray-green in the pre-dawn. The storage shed he'd built himself the first spring they moved in. The empty raised beds he'd told himself he'd get back to planting someday. He drank his coffee, rinsed the mug, left before 6. The Decatur job site was a full-gut renovation on a wide lot off Columbia Drive, a 1970s split level that the owner wanted opened up, modernized, the bones kept, but everything else rethought. Darius had walked it twice before his crew arrived. He knew what it needed. He moved through the framed walls and subfloor with a flashlight before the sun was fully up, checking load point, reading the structure the way he read everything, carefully, without assuming. Marcus, his lead carpenter, arrived first and fell into step beside him without being asked. "Beams solid," Marcus said, nodding at the main support they'd exposed yesterday. "Good. Let's make sure the pocket on the west side is clean before we set anything." That was how mornings worked on his sites. No wasted talk. Clear instruction. Darius led without performing it. He simply moved, and the work organized itself around him. By mid-morning, the crew was running full, the sound of saws and nail guns filling the air with a rhythm Darius had known his whole life. He answered questions, checked measurements, signed off on a materials delivery. Around 11, he stood in the shell of what would become the living room and looked up at the exposed rafters and thought, not for the first time, that there was something he trusted about a house with its walls open. You could see exactly what it was made of. He thought about Amber on the drive home. Not about anything specific, just about the shape of things, The way the marriage had changed texture so gradually that for a long time it had been almost possible to believe the change was normal. Couples settle. The early heat cools. People get busy. He'd told himself those things, and he'd almost believed them. What he couldn't explain away was the cheerfulness. That had started about 18 months ago, right around the time she stopped asking about the business. She used to ask. She used to sit across from him at dinner and want to know which jobs were running, which clients were difficult, what the margins looked like on a commercial bid. Then one day, she stopped. And the stopping was so clean, it felt like a door being shut. In its place came this lightness, this pleasant, humming energy that lived on the surface of her like a coat of fresh paint. She laughed easily. She made plans with friends. She started a lifestyle brand with the $22,000 he'd been glad to give her. She seemed, on the outside, happy. That was the part that kept him still. Not the distance, not the guest room. The happiness, how specific it felt, how carefully maintained, how it never once bent toward him. She was home when he arrived. He heard her before he saw her. Heels on the kitchen tile, a voice bright and quick on the phone, words he couldn't quite catch. When he came through from the garage, she looked up, smiled, held up one finger. 1 second. She was wearing a dress he didn't recognize. Her earrings caught the light. He nodded and moved past her. He went to his home office, closed the door, and sat down at his desk without turning on the lamp. The room was dark except for the glow of the monitor waking up. He opened a folder, password protected, buried 3 levels deep in a drive he used for nothing else. He sat there in the quiet, in the blue light of the screen, still, patient. A man with everything he needed, waiting only for the right moment to use it. 14 months earlier, Darius was in the kitchen when his phone buzzed. Victor's name on the screen. That wasn't unusual. They talked most days, job logistics, materials costs, the ordinary back and forth of 2 men who had built something together. But when Darius picked up and said his name, the pause on the other end told him something right away. Victor was a man who filled silence naturally. When he didn't, it meant he was choosing his words. "You got a minute?" Victor asked. "Yeah." Another small pause. "I need to tell you something. And I need you to just let me say it before you say anything." Darius set down the dish towel. "Go ahead," Victor told him slowly, in the deliberate way of a man laying something heavy down on a table. He had seen Amber at a restaurant in Buckhead. Not once, twice in the same week. Maison Dupree, off Peachtree. The kind of place with low lighting and a wine list that started at $18 a glass. Both times with the same man, Grant Pollard. "The second time," Victor said, "I almost didn't call you. I thought maybe I was reading it wrong." A beat. "I wasn't reading it wrong, Darius." Darius stood in his own kitchen and said nothing for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Down the hall, he could hear the faint sound of the television in the guest room, where Amber had been most of the evening. "How long do you think?" he asked. Victor was quiet. He wasn't a man who softened things with uncertainty when he had a real answer. "Not new," he said. "The way they were sitting, the way they moved around each other. That's not new." "Okay, okay." Victor said it carefully, not pushing, just checking. "Yeah," Darius said. "Okay. Thank you for telling me." After he hung up, he stood in the kitchen for a long time without moving. He didn't put his fist through anything. He didn't raise his voice in an empty room. He just stood there and let the information settle into him the way cold water settles, filling every crack, finding every low place. Then he started thinking. Grant Pollard. Amber had introduced them 8 months ago at a dinner she'd organized. A casual thing, she'd said. Just some people she wanted him to meet. Grant had been easy in that environment, the way wealthy men sometimes were, full of handshakes and war stories from the development world, the kind of man who made everyone in the room feel like they were being offered something. He talked about a commercial partnership opportunity, a multi-phase residential development off Wesley Chapel Road that he said needed a strong contracting anchor. He'd handed Darius a folder before the night was over. Amber had been lit up about it for weeks after. "This is exactly what you've been waiting for." "He's serious, Darius. This is real money." He'd taken the folder to his attorney, a careful woman named Adrienne Cole, who had been reviewing his contracts for 6 years and who had the useful habit of reading everything twice before she said a word. What she found, buried on page 11 in language that took 3 readings to decode, was a default trigger clause. Under certain financial conditions vague enough to be manufactured, Adrienne had noted, Grant Pollard could petition for controlling interest in Washington Contracting, not a minority stake. Control. Darius had told Amber he needed more time to review it. She pushed. She came back to it 3 times in 2 weeks, each time with a slightly different angle. The opportunity window, the competition, how serious developers worked, how he couldn't afford to be slow on something like this. He had not signed. He'd let the conversation fade and waited to see if she'd push harder. She hadn't, which at the time he'd taken for acceptance. Now he understood it differently. She had expected the push to work. When it didn't, she had moved the timeline somewhere he couldn't see. He went to bed that night without saying anything to Amber. He lay in the dark and listened to the television murmuring down the hall and thought about all the things that suddenly had different shapes. He called Sandra Bates at 7 the next morning from his truck, parked in the driveway with the engine off and the windows starting to fog at the edges. Sandra had been recommended by Adrienne 2 years ago for a completely different matter. A subcontractor Darius had suspected of inflating material costs. She'd confirmed it in 3 weeks. She was thorough, discreet, and entirely unbothered by the ugliness that her work sometimes uncovered. He told her what he needed: full financial review of joint accounts and anything connected to Amber's lifestyle brand. Relational surveillance, documented and legally sound. Anything touching Grant Pollard. Sandra asked 3 clarifying questions, gave him a timeline, and named her retainer. He agreed without negotiating. When she hung up, he set the phone on the passenger seat. He sat in the truck in the pre-dawn dark, the neighborhood still quiet around him, a thin line of orange just beginning at the edge of the sky. His jaw was set. His eyes were straight ahead through the fogging glass. He was not broken. He was already building something new, and this time, it wasn't a house. The report arrived on a Tuesday. Not digitally. Sandra didn't work that way. She sent a physical envelope, plain white, no return address, delivered to Washington Contracting's office on Flat Shoals Road. Darius found it in the afternoon mail stack and recognized her handwriting on the front. He took it inside, closed his office door, and told Marcus through the glass that he didn't want to be interrupted. He sat down, opened the envelope. He read for 40 minutes without stopping. The first thing Sandra had found was the account. 17 months prior, 1 month before Amber brought Grant Pollard to that dinner and introduced him as a business opportunity, Amber had quietly added Grant as a co-signatory on a joint savings account. Not their primary account, a secondary one, opened early in the marriage for home repairs and unexpected costs, the kind of account that collected interest and got checked twice a year, the kind Darius wouldn't be watching closely. Sandra had attached the bank records, clean copies, highlighted in yellow. The withdrawals started small, 400 here, 650 there. Nothing that would trigger an automatic bank alert. Over 17 months, in careful, patient increments, $47,000 had moved out of that account and into a separate account registered under Amber's maiden name. Washington was gone from it entirely. The pattern was deliberate. It was not impulse. Someone had thought about it, and planned it, and executed it across a 1.5 years without a single slip. Darius looked at the highlighted numbers for a long time. He turned the page. The second finding was the brand. 2 years ago, Amber had come to him with the idea for a lifestyle consulting business, curated content, wellness partnerships, brand collaborations. She had been genuinely excited in a way that felt real, and he had wanted to support her. He'd funded the startup costs himself, $22,000, written as a gift, no strings, no expectation of repayment. He'd meant it as something generous. He'd meant it as support. Sandra's report showed what that money had actually built. The lifestyle brand was real. It had a website, a small social media following, a handful of actual clients. But threaded through its financials, disguised as consulting fee payments for creative services rendered, was a steady stream of money flowing directly into one of Grant Pollard's LLCs. Not a single large transfer that would draw attention. Small payments, regular, consistent. The kind of thing that looked like ordinary business until you mapped it against Grant's corporate structure and saw exactly where it landed. Darius had funded a pipeline. He just hadn't known it was a pipeline. He set that page face down on his desk. The third finding was the email. Sandra had attached a note explaining where it came from. A woman named Tanya, Grant's former assistant. He had fired her 8 months prior. Abruptly, without cause, with enough cruelty that she'd spent the following weeks quietly making copies of things. She hadn't known what she was going to do with them. When Sandra found her, she knew. The email was dated 13 months ago, sent from Grant's private address to a business partner Darius didn't recognize. The subject line was blank. The relevant portion was 6 lines long. Darius read it the first time fast, the way you do when you're not sure what you're looking at. Then he read it again slowly, each word landing separately. Then he set the paper flat on his desk and read it a third time. The liability we need to dissolve before we can move on the next phase, his name, his company, reduced to a problem on someone else's to-do list, written by a man who had sat at his dinner table and shaken his hand and smiled at him from across a restaurant Amber had chosen, and the whole time, the entire time, this was the word he used, liability. Darius did not move for almost a full minute. Then he picked up his phone and called his sister. Rochelle arrived at the office that evening after her own workday was done. She read the report at his desk while he stood by the window. She didn't say much while she read. That was her way. She processed first, then spoke. When she finished, she closed the folder, set her hands flat on top of it, and looked at him. "We can build a complaint around this," she said. "I know. A real one. Not just divorce leverage. Civil fraud. Fraudulent transfer. Breach of fiduciary duty. Financial conspiracy with a third party." She tapped the folder. "This is 22 pages of case, Darius. Then let's build it." They worked with Adrian over the next 4 months. Every document layered in. Every transfer mapped. Every LLC connection traced and notated. Darius also made one quiet addition to his Washington Contracting Partnership Agreement. A protective clause, drafted carefully with Adrian's guidance, that locked his business equity in place during any active litigation. Victor's co-ownership rights would make the company untouchable until everything was resolved. Darius called Victor on a Sunday morning and explained what he needed. Victor said, "Where do I sign?" He didn't ask a single question. Not one. 22 years of friendship, and that was all it took. Adrian called on a Wednesday afternoon, 4 months after Rochelle's first visit. "It's ready," she said. "Every page holds." Darius closed the folder on his desk. He exhaled once. Not relief, not release. Just air leaving a body that had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. "File it tomorrow morning," he said. 8 o'clock. The alarm went off at 5:15. Darius reached over and cut it before the second pulse. He lay still for a moment, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Then he sat up, pulled the sheets tight, and made his bed. Same as every morning. Corners tucked. Pillow centered. Smooth. He showered, dressed in his Washington contracting work shirt, and laced his boots at the edge of the bed the way he always did. Left first, then right. He made coffee in the kitchen without turning on the overhead light, just the small bulb above the stove. Amber's door was closed upstairs. The house was quiet the way houses get when two people are living entirely separate lives inside the same walls. Somewhere in the Fulton County court system, a 22-page civil complaint with Darius Washington listed as plaintiff was already logged and processing. He poured his coffee into a travel mug, picked up his keys, and drove to the job site. The Decatur project was a full gut renovation, a 1970s ranch house being rebuilt from the studs out for a young couple who stopped by every Saturday to check progress. Darius arrived before his crew, walked the site alone in the early light, and noted 4 things that needed attention before the drywall team showed up. He left notes on the workbench. He answered 2 supply calls before 8. He reviewed a subcontractor invoice that had 2 line items billed incorrectly and flagged them both. His crew worked. He worked alongside them. Nobody looking at him would have seen a man waiting for anything. That was the point. He left the site at 2:30. He drove home, changed out of his work clothes, and sat down in the living room. The folder was on the coffee table, the divorce filing, Amber's copy, set neatly in the center. He did not turn on the television. He did not check his phone. He sat with his hands loose in his lap and waited. Amber's car pulled into the driveway at 4:12. He heard her key in the lock, heard the small sounds of her coming inside, her bag set down, her shoes. Then she came around the corner into the living room and stopped. She looked at him, then at the folder on the table. Something shifted in her face, fast and controlled, the way a person adjusts when they walk into a room they didn't expect. "Sit down," Darius said. "I need to talk to you." She sat, not beside him on the sofa. Across from him, in the armchair nearest the window, a distance that had nothing to do with where the furniture was and everything to do with where they had been for years. He slid the folder across the table. She opened it carefully, read the header, read it again. "You filed for divorce." "Already filed," Darius said. "This morning. Those are your copies." She turned pages slowly at first, then faster. Her eyes moved across the settlement terms, equitable distribution, proceeds from the home split according to documented equity contribution, no spousal support claim filed on either side. Clean, straightforward. The kind of filing a man makes when he simply wants out, and nothing more. He watched her read. He watched the exact moment she decided what this was. Her shoulders came down, just slightly. Her grip on the papers loosened. She turned to the last page, where the signature line waited. And something happened at the corner of her mouth. A small movement she didn't fully catch in time. Not a full smile. The beginning of one. The kind that comes from somewhere deep before you can decide whether to let it show. She picked up the pen. She signed the way you sign for a package at the front door. Present enough to hold the pen, distracted enough not to care. When she set it down, the tension in her face had softened into something that was almost relief and almost satisfaction, and she wasn't working very hard to hide either one. "I'll call my attorney in the morning," she said. She was already reaching for her phone. She stood, still looking at the screen, and walked toward the stairs without glancing back at him once. Her bedroom door closed. Darius sat in the living room and did not move for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Rochelle. She signed. A beat of silence. How did she look? Like she thought she won. "Good." Rochelle's voice was even and certain. "Adrian is ready to move first thing tomorrow. Tell her to move." That night, sound carried through the ceiling the way it does in a house that is mostly empty. Amber's voice, animated, lighter than it had been in months, the shape of relief on the other end of a phone call. Darius sat in his home office for a while. Then he went upstairs, brushed his teeth, and set his alarm. He lay back in the dark and thought about his father, about a 2-bedroom apartment in East Point, about a man who had lost his business and his savings and 12 years of work in the span of 8 months, who never said a bitter word about any of it, who simply made his bed every morning and started again. Darius stared at the ceiling. He reached over and turned out the light. The alarm went off at 5:15. Darius cut it before the second pulse. Same as every morning. He made his bed, showered, laced his boots, left, then right. Coffee in the travel mug, keys off the hook by the door. The guest room was quiet upstairs. The house was quiet everywhere. He drove to the job site in the dark. Tuesday moved the way Tuesdays move on a job site in full swing. Constant, loud, and unforgiving of distraction. The drywall crew had started at 7. There was a delivery discrepancy with the window casings that needed sorting before 10. A city inspector was scheduled for noon, and Darius wanted the site documentation organized and ready an hour before that, not 5 minutes. He moved through all of it the same way he always did, deliberate, present. His clipboard marked with notes in his tight, even handwriting. His crew checked in with him and got clear answers. The site ran the way his sites always ran, because he ran it. Nobody saw anything different about him. That was the point. Amber had slept late. She came downstairs at 9-something in a silk robe, made herself a coffee, and sat at the kitchen island scrolling her phone. She had a nail appointment at 1, maybe lunch after. The day felt open in a way days hadn't felt in a long time, and she let herself sit inside that feeling without examining it too closely. She was still at the island when the doorbell rang at 11:40. A postal carrier in a blue shirt. Certified letter. He needed a signature. She signed, carried the envelope inside, and set it on the counter without urgency. The return address was a law firm, Adrian Cole and Associates. She assumed it was something related to the divorce filing. Paperwork, probably. Formalities. She slit the envelope open with one finger and unfolded the pages at the kitchen counter, coffee still warm beside her. She read the first line, then the second. Then she went back and read the first line again, more slowly, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something else if she gave them the chance. Recivil complaint, fraudulent transfer of marital assets, breach of fiduciary duty, financial conspiracy. Filed Fulton County Superior Court, case no. She turned to page 2, then page 3. Page 4 stopped her. A table. Neat columns. Dates, amounts, account numbers. The joint savings account she had barely thought about in over a year. 17 transactions listed in careful order, each one just under the threshold that would have flagged a bank alert. The total at the bottom, $47,000. Her maiden name on the receiving account, Sandra Bates, Investigative Services, listed as the source. Her hand was very still on the page. She turned to page 7. The consulting fees. Her business, the one Darius had written a check for without hesitation, the one she had told him was finally gaining traction, mapped out as a financial pipeline. Payment dates, LLC account numbers, Grant's name printed cleanly in a box on the left side of a chart that left absolutely nothing to interpretation. Page 12 was the property equity transfer. She knew before she read it what it would say. She turned to page 17 slowly. The way you open something you already know is going to hurt. The email was printed in full. Grant's words in clean 12-point font. The liability we need to dissolve before we can move on the next phase. His name, his LLC header, the date, 13 months ago. She stood at the counter and could not feel her hands. Page 20. A check stub. One she had run through an account she was certain nobody knew about. Certain. She stared at it for a long time. 22 pages, 14 months of work. Filed at 8:03 yesterday morning, while she was asleep upstairs in the guest room, while he was making his coffee in the dark, while she was dreaming about everything that was finally about to begin. She called Grant. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again. 3 rings. Voicemail. She called a 3rd time, and on the 3rd ring he picked up, distracted. Mid-sentence with someone else, the sound of an office or a restaurant behind him. "Hey," he started, not really there yet. "Grant." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I need you to listen to me." Darius filed a civil complaint. It's 22 pages. It has everything. It has the account and the consulting fees, and there's an email, your email, and I don't... Her voice cracked directly down the middle, and she could not find the 2 halves of it. Grant! He knew. He knew all of it. He knew. She heard Grant's voice shift, sharper, quieter, pulling away from whoever else was in the room with him. She heard him start to say something. She wasn't sure what, because her knees had stopped working. She went down slowly, her back against the kitchen cabinet, the 22 pages sliding off the counter and fanning out across the tile floor around her. Page 4 near her left hand, page 17 face up in front of her. The liability we need to dissolve. She sat on the floor of the kitchen in the house Darius Washington had built, and she could not stop crying. Across town, Darius walked his job site with his clipboard. He paused at the northwest corner of the house, crouched down, and examined the foundation framing with the focused eye of a man checking his own work. He made a small note, stood back up, checked the next thing, then the next. Grant Pollard read the civil complaint on a Wednesday morning in his attorney's office on Peachtree Road, a glass of water he hadn't touched sitting on the table beside him. His attorney, Marcus Webb, walked him through it page by page. Marcus was a tall, careful man who charged $400 an hour and earned it. He did not rush. He did not dramatize. He simply laid out what was there. When they finished, Grant leaned back in his chair. "This is a hurt man swinging," he said. Marcus set down his pen. "Some of the documentation is solid. Documentation put together by a contractor from Decatur." Grant straightened his cufflink. "The equity clause is annoying. The account stuff is a problem, but nothing here is criminal. This is a divorce filing with extra steps." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I'd take it seriously." "I am taking it seriously." Grant picked up his phone. "I'm taking it seriously enough to make it go away before it costs me more than it has to." He called Amber that afternoon. She answered on the first ring. She had been waiting. Grant's voice was calm and warm again, the version of him she always reached for when she was scared, the version that made her feel like she was standing next to someone who knew what he was doing. He told her the complaint was manageable. He told her Marcus had seen worse. He told her all Darius really wanted was to feel like he had some power back, and the smart move was to give him a little of that. Let him feel heard, then close this quietly with a reduced settlement and no public filing. "I need you to call him," Grant said. "Keep it soft. Tell him you want to talk modifications. See where his head is. And if he doesn't want to talk, he'll want to talk." Grant's voice carried the easy confidence of a man who had never been genuinely wrong in his own mind. "He's a contractor, Amber. He wants his money. Give him a path to some of it, and he'll take it." Amber said, "Okay." She called Darius the next morning. He picked up on the second ring. "Amber." His voice was even, not cold, not warm, just present. "Hey." She cleared her throat. "I was hoping we could talk about the filing. I think there might be a way to resolve this that's better for both of us." "I'm listening," Darius said. She walked through it carefully, the way Grant had coached her. A modified settlement, reduced figures, a clean separation with no public proceedings. She kept her voice measured, reasonable, like a woman having a business conversation rather than a woman who had spent part of Tuesday on her kitchen floor. Darius asked a few quiet questions. Nothing aggressive. He let her talk. He said, in the right places, and gave her nothing to push against. At the end, he said he'd think about it, that he appreciated her reaching out, that he understood she was in a difficult spot. Then she said it. Grant says none of this has to go anywhere public. She said it the way people say things when they're repeating someone else's words, just slightly outside her own register, a little too smooth, like a line she'd rehearsed. Darius said, "Tell Grant I appreciate that." He kept his voice easy. He kept his voice warm, but he had heard exactly what she said, and he knew exactly what it meant. Grant was not managing this from confidence. Grant was managing this from fear. A man who was actually confident let his attorney handle it. A man who was afraid started sending messages through other people's mouths. Darius ended the call politely, set his phone down on his desk, and reached over and stopped the recording. That same week, Rochelle called him on a Thursday evening. He was in his home office. She didn't bother with small talk. "I found something," she said. "You need to see it." He drove to her house. She had documents spread across her kitchen table, printed pages, some flagged with yellow tabs, a timeline she had drawn out on a legal pad in her neat, precise handwriting. She walked him through it without commentary, the way she always did. Just the facts, just the shape of it. 2 women before Amber. 2 separate relationships across the last 8 years, each one following the same architecture. Introduction during a development planning phase, romantic escalation, access to the woman's finances through a combination of shared accounts and informal investment structures. Money moved into Grant's LLC during the active phase of a development deal, and then, once the financing window closed, a clean and quiet exit. No public incident. No legal exposure. 2 women who had each believed they were building a future with someone who had already scheduled their departure. Rochelle tapped the legal pad. "He's done this before," she said. "Amber isn't his partner. She's his third." Darius looked at the timeline for a long time. He didn't say anything right away. He pulled the pages toward him and went through them again slowly, the way he went through a contract, looking at the structure, not just the surface. Then he straightened the stack, set it down, and slid it across the table toward Rochelle. "Give it to Mom," he said. "Tell her to keep the coffee shop meeting." Adrienne Cousins walked into Fulton County Superior Court at 8:15 in the morning, wearing a charcoal gray suit and carrying a document case she had packed the night before. Darius was not with her. That was intentional. He had a crew to supervise in Decatur. He had a job site to walk, materials to check, a schedule to hold. Life as normal. Life completely normal. Adrienne had told him his presence wasn't needed, and he had agreed without argument, because he understood that the most powerful thing he could do that morning was be exactly where he was supposed to be. Not in a courtroom watching, but on a job site working, while the machinery he had spent 14 months building ran on its own. Adrienne did not need him there. That was the point. The hearing took 40 minutes. The judge was a compact woman named Honorable Denise Hartwell, who read documents the way a surgeon reads X-rays, quickly, quietly, and without sentiment. She reviewed Adrienne's motion, reviewed the supporting documentation, asked 2 pointed questions about the threshold-structured withdrawals, and received 2 precise answers. She granted partial relief. Amber's maiden name account, frozen pending discovery. The LLC accounts tied to the fake consulting arrangement, frozen pending discovery. The divorce settlement Amber had signed 2 days prior, placed under mandatory legal review. The fraud filing made it unenforceable as written. The clean exit Amber had smiled about was now a document with no legal teeth. Adrienne walked out of the courthouse at 9:05, called Darius, and delivered the news in one sentence. Partial freeze granted. Settlement is in review. Good, Darius said. She could hear his crew working in the background, the sound of something being built. Grant's attorney called Adrian at 2:15 that afternoon. His name was Marcus Webb. He was measured and professional, and he chose his opening carefully, framing the call as a courtesy, a preliminary conversation between counsel, nothing formal, just two attorneys exploring whether there was a path to efficient resolution. Adrian let him finish. Then she said, "My client is not interested in negotiation." A pause. Marcus tried again, gently, with the practiced patience of a man who charged $400 an hour. He mentioned the cost of discovery. He mentioned the timeline. He mentioned the possibility of a confidential settlement that addressed Darius's financial concerns fully. Adrian said, "I heard you the first time. My client is not interested in negotiation." She ended the call. Darius made his 2 additional moves that afternoon. The first one took 90 minutes, 2 phone calls, and 1 in-person meeting at a coffee shop near Perimeter Center. Adrian seated beside him, present for every word. He contacted 3 of Grant's current development financing partners. He did not accuse. He did not dramatize. He introduced himself, stated clearly that he was currently involved in active civil litigation with Grant Pollard in Fulton County involving financial fraud, and suggested, in the measured tone of a man simply passing along useful information, that they might want to consult their own counsel regarding any active financial arrangements with Grant's LLC. He said it the same way each time. Same words, same tone. The tone of a man reading from a set of facts, because the facts were all he needed. 2 partners launched internal reviews before the day was over. One of them, a private equity group out of Sandy Springs, with a planned capital contribution of $800,000 scheduled for the following month, suspended that contribution pending due diligence review. Grant's Buckhead development had 3 legs. One of them was now gone. The second move was Victor's. He signed the formal invocation paperwork at 4 in the afternoon, notarized it, and had it delivered to Amber's attorney of record before 5. The equity lock clause activated cleanly, exactly as it had been designed to do. Darius's business interest in Washington Contracting was now legally unreachable. It could not be included in any divorce settlement. It could not be claimed, divided, transferred, or touched. Whatever Amber had been counting on, the company was no longer part of the math. She called at 6:17. Darius was in his truck in the job site parking lot, windows down, the sound of the city settling into evening around him. He looked at her name on the screen for 1 full second before he answered. Amber. She started talking right away. Too fast. Her voice had a quality he had never heard in 9 years of marriage. Not the performed sadness she used when she wanted something, not the controlled frustration she deployed when she didn't get it. This was different. It was tighter, thinner. It was fear. She asked about the equity clause. She asked if there was room to talk about it. She said she thought the filing was about money, and she wanted to understand what he actually wanted, because maybe they could still, and then the sentence ran out of road, and she stopped. Darius listened to all of it. Then he said, "I'll let my attorney know you called." He hung up. He sat in the parking lot for a while after that. The evening was warm. Somewhere on the site behind him, a door banged shut. He called Victor at 8. "Tomorrow," he said. He called her at 7:15 in the morning. She picked up on the second ring, which told him she had been waiting. "I want to meet tonight," Darius said. "At the house, 6 o'clock. I want to talk about a resolution." A pause. Short. She was calculating. "Just us?" she asked. "Just us." Another pause. He could hear her breathing. He could hear the thing underneath the breathing, the hope that this was what she thought it was. A man at the edge of his own exhaustion, offering a way to end it quietly. "Okay," she said. 6. He hung up and finished his coffee. He arrived home at 4:30 and moved through the house with purpose. He set 2 folders on the dining room table, the first thicker, the second thinner, both rubber-banded shut. He set a glass of water on each side of the table. He straightened one of the chairs. Then he went to the kitchen, washed his hands, and waited. Amber pulled into the driveway at 6:03. She came alone. No attorney. No Grant. She was dressed well. Not formally, but deliberately. The outfit of someone who wanted to appear unbothered. She had done something different with her hair, and she was wearing the small gold earrings he had bought her in Savannah on their 3rd anniversary, which he suspected was not an accident. He was already seated when she came through the front door. Both folders in front of him, hands flat on the table, completely still. She stopped in the doorway of the dining room and looked at him, then at the table. "Darius, come sit down," he said. "You want some water?" She sat across from him, not beside him. The glass of water sat untouched between them. She set her purse on the floor and folded her hands and looked at him with the careful, measured expression of a woman who had prepared for this. He let the quiet sit for a moment. Then he opened the first folder. He did not accuse her. He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward or press his hands into the table or let any particular emotion move across his face. He simply opened the folder and began to walk her through it, methodically, completely, the way he walked a new client through a project estimate. Item by item, line by line, the joint account, the date Grant was added as co-signatory, the first withdrawal, the pattern of the subsequent ones, sized deliberately to stay beneath the bank's flagging threshold, the total, $47,000. He slid the page across the table and let her look at it. She looked at it. That account was... "The next page," he said quietly, "is the lifestyle brand." Her mouth closed. The consulting fee payments, the LLC they routed into, the dates, the amounts. $22,000 of seed money he had given her because she had come to him with a dream, and he had believed in it, moving in a thin, steady stream out of their life and into Grant Pollard's development fund. He turned the page. The property equity transfer, the filing, the documentation, the paper trail that she had assembled over 2 years with genuine patience and genuine skill, laid out now in front of her under fluorescent light like a blueprint. She tried denial first. "These numbers are out of context," she said. "You don't understand how the business was structured." Darius did not respond. He turned another page. She tried deflection. "My attorney should be here. I'm not going to sit here and be ambushed without—" "You chose to come without your attorney," he said. "That was your choice." She shifted in her chair. Her jaw tightened. "You've had someone following me. You went through my private accounts without—" "Amber." His voice didn't rise. It stayed exactly where it was, even and unhurried. The last page. She looked down. The mentorship setup. The timeline showing that Grant's partnership arrangement with her had begun 3 months before she ever introduced him to Darius. The email from Grant's LLC. The liability we need to dissolve before we can move on the next phase. The silence that followed was different from all the ones before it. She sat very still. Something behind her eyes moved, shifted, and then hardened into something else. He watched it happen. He had expected it. She looked up at him. "I'll tell people you were abusive," she said. She said it carefully, the way someone sets down something fragile they've been carrying for a long time. Not loud, not frantic, deliberate. The calculation of a woman who had kept this in reserve, who had decided this was the final door, the one thing that could still burn the whole thing down around both of them. She held his gaze, waited. Darius reached for the second folder. He removed the rubber band, placed it flat on the table, and opened it. The second folder was thinner than the first, but what it held was precise. 14 months of documented communications, texts, emails, screenshots with timestamps that Darius's attorney had authenticated and cataloged. He did not describe them. He let her read. She got 2 pages in before she stopped. One text, dated a Tuesday in March, sent at 9:47 at night. The same week, she had sat across from him in the living room and suggested they try marriage counseling. Her voice soft and her eyes full of something he had briefly, foolishly mistaken for genuine feeling. The text was to Grant. He has no idea. He trusts everything. Amber stared at the page. "I've already provided all of this to Adrienne," Darius said. "It's part of the record." She did not speak. She did not move. The woman who had walked in prepared, dressed carefully, earrings chosen deliberately, armed with a final threat she had been saving, sat completely still across from him, both hands flat on the table, and said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say. Darius collected the pages from the second folder one at a time, stacked them, and slid them back inside. He did the same with the first. Both folders closed, both rubber bands back in place. He stood, pushed his chair in, and picked them up. He looked at her once, not with anger, not with grief, just with the clear eyes of a man who had finished exactly what he came to do. "I didn't come here because I needed you to know I knew," he said. "I came because I needed you to understand that you never knew me at all." He walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the evening air. His truck started on the first turn. He backed out of the driveway, shifted into drive, and pulled down the street without once looking in the rearview mirror. The house shrank behind him. He did not watch it go. The call came at 8:12 in the morning. Grant was still in his robe, standing at the kitchen island of his Buckhead condo, when his attorney's number lit up his phone. He answered expecting a routine update, a progress report, the kind of measured reassurance that cost him $400 an hour. What he got instead was a problem. "Marcus just pulled out," his attorney said. "Formally. As of yesterday evening. He's retained independent litigation counsel." Grant set down his coffee cup. "Marcus doesn't pull out. That's not how he operates. He did this time." A pause. "Grant, when Marcus retains his own attorney, it means he's not just exiting. It means he's positioning himself to become a witness." The word witness landed differently than Grant expected it to. He spent the next 20 minutes asking questions he already knew the answers to. By the end of the call, he had 2 pieces of information he did not have when he woke up. One, Marcus's attorney, in the course of reviewing the due diligence documentation connected to the Darius Washington complaint, had found something inside Grant's LLC that had nothing to do with Darius at all. Something older. A financial irregularity Grant had buried 3 years ago under 2 layers of entity structure, confident it was invisible. It was not invisible anymore. Marcus's attorney filed their own civil complaint before noon. The second co-investor called Grant directly. He did not use his attorney. He simply called, said what he had to say, and hung up. The third co-investor sent a single email through counsel. 2 sentences, professionally worded, communicating the same thing. By Thursday morning, the Buckhead development had no anchor financing, no co-investors, and no structural support. 3 years of positioning, 18 months of deal architecture, 2 of Amber's accounts worth of undisclosed funding, gone in 72 hours. His attorney told him Friday afternoon that settlement with Darius Washington was no longer a strategic option to consider. It was the only option he had. Grant resisted. That was who he was, a man who had operated without serious consequence for long enough that resistance was his first instinct, even when the math had already run against him. He delayed the initial call. He pushed back on the restitution figure. He told his attorney the $22,000 consulting arrangement could be argued as a legitimate business expense. His attorney let him finish. Then told him what the discovery timeline looked like if they proceeded to litigation. What would surface? How much of it was already on record? Grant went quiet. He capitulated the following Monday. The settlement agreement covered everything. $47,000 for the drained account. $22,000 for the money laundered through the fake consulting arrangement. Additional damages for the property equity transfer. A figure Adrian had calculated with the particular precision of an attorney who understood that every dollar matters to the man who earned it. All legal fees, both sides. It was, Darius's attorney noted when she called him with the final terms, comprehensive. 3 days before the settlement was signed, Patricia Washington walked into a coffee shop on Cascade Road at 10 in the morning and sat down across from Amber. Amber had arrived first. She was dressed carefully, the way she always dressed when she was trying to manage an impression. She had ordered a latte she was not drinking. She had prepared, on the drive over, a version of events that positioned her as someone who had simply made a painful personal choice, a woman who had outgrown a marriage and handled the exit imperfectly. She had practiced it. She had spent 9 years trying to earn something from this woman, some warmth, some signal of acceptance. She had never fully gotten it and had never fully understood why. Patricia sat down, set her purse in her lap, and placed a manila envelope on the table between them without a word. Amber looked at the envelope, looked at Patricia. Patricia's face was composed and still, the face of a woman who had decided, before she walked in, exactly how long she was willing to stay. Amber opened the envelope. Inside was a document package. Rochelle had compiled it herself, methodically, completely, the way she did everything. 2 women before Amber. The same financial architecture in both cases. The same entry pattern, the charm, the partnership language, the access to accounts, the undisclosed funding of development deals. The same exit, quiet, without restitution, once the financing was secured. Names, dates, account documentation, emails that read, in places, almost exactly like the ones Amber had received. The same words in a different woman's inbox. Amber read it slowly. She turned each page with care, as if she was afraid of what the next one would say. The coffee shop was busy around them. Quiet conversations, the sound of the espresso machine, someone laughing near the window. None of it reached the table where they were sitting. When Amber looked up, her eyes were wet. Patricia looked at her for a moment. "He didn't love you," she said. "He rented you." She picked up her purse, stood, and left. Her coffee sat on the table untouched. Grant Pollard signed the settlement agreement on a Tuesday morning at 9:40 in his attorney's office in Midtown. A glass and steel conference room with a view of the highway he did not look at. He signed each page where his attorney pointed. He did not read them. 14 miles away, on a cleared lot in Doraville, Darius Washington stood at a folding table set up near the tree line. A set of blueprints spread open in front of him, a red pen in his hand. The blueprints were for a commercial build, $4.1 million, his first. He studied them the way he studied everything, closely, completely, missing nothing. 14 months is a long time, long enough for concrete to cure, long enough for permits to clear and framers to finish, and a cleared lot to become something that casts a shadow, long enough for a man to stop measuring his life against what was taken and start measuring it against what he is building next. Darius pulled into the Doraville job site at 6:45 on a Monday morning in October, and the place was already alive. 12 crew members, a concrete sub with 4 of his own, 2 equipment operators running machines along the far edge of the lot, the low groan of their engines carrying through the cool air. More people, more noise, more scope than anything Washington Contracting had touched before. He sat in his truck for a moment and looked at it. The $4.1 million contract had come through a developer named Leon Pruitt, a referral from an architect Darius had worked with twice on residential builds, a man who respected Darius's precision and said so plainly. When Grant Pollard's Buckhead development collapsed and left a crater in the market, Leon had needed a contractor he could trust. Someone had said Darius's name. Leon had called. That was how it happened. No drama, no grand gesture. Just the reputation Darius had spent 20 years building, doing what it was built to do. He got out of the truck. Victor's truck was already parked at the far end of the lot, and Victor was leaning against the front of it with his arms crossed and a cup of coffee in one hand, watching the crew the way he always watched a new site, taking its measure quietly. He heard Darius's door and turned. They met in the middle of the gravel lot. Victor extended his hand. Darius took it. They shook once, firm, and then just stood there for a moment with the noise of the site filling the space around them. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. Darius's new house was in Ormwood Park, smaller than the Stonecrest Colonial, quieter, with a narrow porch in the front and a deep backyard that had been the reason he signed the lease the same afternoon he walked through it. He had stood in that backyard alone, looking at the overgrown rectangle of earth along the back fence, and he had known. His father used to grow tomatoes, sweet peppers, collard greens in a raised bed along the side of a house that no longer existed. Darius had helped as a boy without understanding, at the time, why it mattered. He understood now. The garden was still modest. Tomatoes, herbs, a row of collards he had put in late and babied through the first cool weeks. But it was his. Every inch of it chosen without anyone else's input, tended without anyone else's eye on it, growing on its own quiet schedule. He was in the backyard most Sunday mornings before church, just checking, just being there. Sunday afternoons, he was at his mother's table. Patricia had resumed the dinners without ceremony. She had simply called one Sunday 6 weeks after the settlement was signed and told Darius to come at 4. He had come. Rochelle had been there with her 2 kids already in the backyard. Victor had come a few Sundays later, arriving with a covered dish and the ease of a man who knew where he belonged. It had become the rhythm of things, steady and unperformed, the way the best things always are. The phone call came on a Wednesday evening in September, 2 weeks before the Doraville build began. A woman named Cheryl, who had worked with Amber at the pharmaceutical company a decade ago, called Darius's cell with the particular careful tone of someone who had rehearsed how to say something. She mentioned Amber after about 90 seconds of small talk, said she was going through a hard time, said it with the delicate weight of someone delivering news they believed was significant. Darius listened, let her finish. I hope she finds her way, he said. He meant it, not with warmth, with finality. The way you say something true about a person who is no longer your concern, because they are simply no longer your concern. Amber's outcome belonged entirely to Amber now. He had removed himself from that equation completely, and the removal was clean. He thanked Cheryl for calling and hung up. Grant Pollard, as of that same month, was subject to 2 active civil suits. His LLC's development license was suspended pending a formal investigation by the Georgia Secretary of State's office. He was renting an apartment in Marietta, a 2-bedroom, the narration noted without celebration, less than 4 miles from the Doraville lot, where Darius had broken ground on the largest contract of his career. On the first evening of the commercial build, after the crew had cleared out and the equipment had gone quiet, Darius walked the site alone. He walked it the way he had always walked a job site, slowly, deliberately, eyes moving across every detail. He checked the footer stakes, noted where the drainage grade would need attention, stood at the center of the cleared lot, and turned a full slow circle, reading the space. Same discipline, same precision, same quiet authority that had always been his. More of everything now. He stopped at the eastern edge of the site as the last of the light dropped behind the tree line, the sky going from orange to a deep, still blue. The city hummed somewhere beyond the tree line. The site was silent. She signed those papers, smiling. He'd been counting on that. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.